Hello everyone, my name is Rob, welcome to Kinetic Rugby League. In this video I'm going to be giving you my NRL Finals Week 1 tips and predictions. Now if you want to see how I got on last week, you can check the pinned comment down below. Also, I apologise, it's not the usual setup again, back to the old one, because the SD card is messing up again, but we move. So let's get started on the first game for this week. Kicking things off for this week, we have the Brisbane Broncos versus Melbourne Storm. Starting with the Broncos, they finished their NRL regular season in second place on the ladder. They've won 4 in their last 5 games, and their home record is 7 wins and 5 losses. They also lost last time out against Melbourne Storm. This week, they'll be hosting from the Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane. Now, looking at the squad that they've announced so far for this week, in the backs, it includes Reece Walsh, Jesse Arthurs, Tony Staggs, Herbie Farnworth, Selwyn Cobbo, Ezra Mam and Adam Reynolds. Looking at the forwards, it includes Thomas Flegler, Billy Walters, Payne Haas, Kurt Capewell, Jordan Rickey and Patrick Carrigan. On the bench, they have Tyson Smoothie, Brendan Piacora, Kobe Hetherington and Keenan Palacia. Looking at percentage stats for the Broncos, it includes a 78% win rate, 77% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 86.6%. Moving on to Melbourne Storm, they finished their NRL regular season in 3rd place on the ladder. They've also won 4 in the last 5. Their away record is 7 wins and 5 losses. They also won last time out against the Broncos. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far for this week, in the backs it includes Nick Meaney, Will Warbrick, Marion Seve, Young Tonamaipea, Xavier Coates, Cameron Munster and Jerome Hughes. In the forwards, it includes Tui Kamkamitha, Harry Grant, Christian Welch, Trent Liaro, Eliezer Katoa and Josh King. And on the bench is Bronson Garlick, Tom Eisenhuth, Nelson Asfa-Salamona and Ryan Pappenhausen. Looking at percentage stats for the Melbourne Storm, they have a 65% win rate, 80% completion rate and a tackle efficiency of 86.7%. So what some of you may do is look at the previous results from this season. One game in particular we know is not a good indication of how this game in particular is going to go, but I would also argue that the other one is also not a good representation. Now, last week is obvious, don't really need to explain much, but both teams were basically using B teams. There's a few regular individuals. I would maybe include Jock Madden in that only as he's the first name up when Reynolds is missing, or possibly when Ezra Mam is missing. So Jock Madden was usual for the Broncos, but we look at the Melbourne Storm, they had individuals like Ryan Pappenhausen, who's recently come back from injury, and Justin Olam, who hasn't been in the squad for a little while. Last week was not a good representation of how things could go this week. Everyone knows that. But some people might look at the game from round 11 when Melbourne Storm beat the Broncos. But if we look at the things that kind of take away from that possible narrative, is that, number one, Adam Reynolds went off after 20 minutes and did not return. He had a head injury, a head injury, knocked himself out and didn't return. Herbie Farnworth ended up with a sin bin. For me, it was a little bit soft. It was like a professional foul, but it is what it is. He was sent off for 10 minutes. And there was Patrick Carrigan with a hip drop as well. So in 2 instances, Melbourne Storm were a man up for 20 minutes and they didn't have to compete against Adam Reynolds. Now, Melbourne Storm and Brisbane Broncos both had a player sin binned, but that was with like 3 minutes to go when the game was already pretty much done. So you can look at that if you want to and say, well, Melbourne Storm beat the Broncos, but they were a man up for 20 minutes and they didn't have to play against Adam Reynolds for 60 minutes. For me, that kind of changes the narrative. If that's the direction you wanted to go down in favour of Melbourne Storm, I think it takes it right back in favour of the Broncos, that they didn't have those players available. So we look at this one, the ball is going to get in the hands of Reece Walsh often. It's going to be in the hands of Ezra Mam often. I think the way that Patrick Carrigan allows the ball to move smoothly from left to right or right to left is huge for them. They already have a big forward pack in Thomas Flegler and Payne Haas, as we know. So it's all about Melbourne Storm slowing down that progress through the middle. They're going to find ways to find extra yardage out wide. Players like Herbie Farnworth, they've got a good step so they can get round a player. Tony Staggs, he's got a good burst of pace and also strength to get round a player. So if they give those players opportunities to do that, they could be in big trouble. It looks like Justin Olam would be on the same side as Tony Staggs, so he might be able to slow down that progress, but he's not going to be included in the squad, or isn't, at least at the moment. So Tony Staggs might have a better chance of getting around the centre on his side and be able to break through and hand the ball off to Selwyn Cobbo. In a one-on-one scenario, he might kick the ball over the top. He's got that kind of skill to kick and chase. So It's all about, with Melbourne Storm, especially when they've got the ball, they have a good completion rate. I think it's second best in the NRL. So they need to complete very, very well. Of course, it goes without saying, limit the number of errors, but you want to keep possession for yourself and make sure that it's not in the hands of Reynolds or Mam or Walsh or even Carrigan, as I said, moving the ball from left to right or right to left. So Melbourne Storm need to make sure that they complete high, and especially when they have the Broncos pinned back, which will happen from time to time, although I don't think it's going to be as much as the Broncos will do it on Melbourne Storm, they need to do whatever they can to disrupt the Broncos' defence. So that could essentially be just going to one side and intentionally stopping and switching the play back, just to kind of create a second phase-like scenario where the Broncos' defence is kind of all out of shape. And getting that out of shape as much as possible is so important, especially when you bring Ryan Papenhuyzen into the starting 13. Now, he's on the bench at the moment, and I'm sure he will feature plenty of minutes in this game. But Ryan Papenhuyzen off the cuff is brilliant, and especially with Cameron Munster, his kicking game, he can get repeat sets, and Jerome Hughes has a brilliant step on him, and especially dangerous through the middle as a small guy against such, big guys through the middle. So that is certainly a path to success for Melbourne Storm. Brisbane Broncos, they just want to limit that as much as possible. Get up quick on Munster and Hughes, limit their time, complete highly, and just make sure it's in, the ball is in the hands of Reece Walsh, Ezra Mam and Adam Reynolds as much as possible. I can imagine from Melbourne Storm as well a few early kicks. I can imagine early kicks from the Broncos as well. Storm will want to turn Reece Walsh around. They don't want to give him time to run with the ball. They want to pin the Broncos back as much as possible. So early kicks, we could see it as early as second or third tackle. Third tackle maybe if they receive the ball first. They just want to put the ball into the Broncos half. Or even second tackle when they've got the Broncos pinned back on their own try line, just to try and get a repeat set and make them start to worry about kicks into the in-goal area, especially from Cameron Munster. I feel he's likely to do that a lot. But I think we'll see a very standard game from the Broncos. Get your 5 tackles out of the way and you kick on the last. And they'll just be kicking into the corners. For me, it's just going to be a simple sort of regular game plan from the Broncos, and it's just about the execution, which I think they'll do very well. But for Melbourne Storm, it's about just creating as much chaos as possible and putting the Broncos in an awkward position. But I think overall, until Ryan Papenhuyzen is properly in this team and we see that usual spine and Nick Meaney gets to go on the wing, that does leave out either Coates or Warbrick, probably Warbrick. But I do appreciate still having Nick Meaney in that team in some way. But for me, the Broncos are still too strong at the moment. But I think later on, if these teams meet up later on in finals, it could go a different way. But for now, for me, Broncos are still too strong. So I'm going to go with the Broncos to win 1-12 points. Next up, we have the Penrith Panthers versus the New Zealand Warriors. Starting with the Panthers, they finished their regular season in first place on the ladder. They've won 4 in their last 5, and their home record is 9 wins and 3 losses. They also won last time out against the Cowboys. This week, they'll be hosting from the Bluebet Stadium in Penrith. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far for this week. In the backs, it includes Dylan Edwards, Sonia Taruva, Isaac Tango, Stephen Crichton, Brian Toto, Jack Cogger, and Nathan Cleary. In the forwards is Moses Leota, Mitch Kenny, James Fisher-Harris, Scott Sorensen, Liam Martin, Isaiah Yeo. And on the bench is Tyrone Peachy, Lindsay Smith, Spencer Leniu, and Zach Hosking. Looking at percentage stats for the Panthers, they have a 74% win rate, 82% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 87.3%. Moving on to the New Zealand Warriors, they finished their regular season in 4th place on the ladder. They've also won 4 in the last 5. Their away record is 8 wins and 4 losses. They also lost last time out against the Dolphins. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far for this week, in the backs it includes Chance Nickel-Klokstad, Dallin Wateni-Zalesniak, Rocco Berry, Adam Pompey, Marcelo Montoya, Tamari Martin, and Sean Johnson. In the forwards it includes Adam Fanua-Blake, Wade Egan, Mitchell Barnett, Jackson Ford, Marata Niokore, and Tohu Harris. And on the bench is Dylan Walker, Jazz Tavanga, Bailey Siranen, and Josh Curran. Looking at percentage stats for the Warriors, they have a 70% win rate, 78% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 88.1%. So the first thing that was a very positive sign for the Panthers last week was being able to bounce back, especially after a tough loss against the Eels, in a game that they should not have lost at all. They were a little bit out of shape. I don't think they had Mitch Kenny or Jerome Luai, but the following week they put in a strong performance against the Cowboys, a team that was pushing for top 8, and a team that I thought could do it. I predicted the Cowboys to win, but it was a very strong statement win from the Panthers. Now we look at the Warriors. They didn't have some of their key players available. I don't think there was any Nickel Klokstad or Tenny Zalesniak or Fanoa Blake. Like, they rested a couple people, which is completely understandable. I think they already had top 4 in the bag. So they rested some people, lost to the Dolphins, which is fair enough. I predicted the Dolphins to win that one, I believe. So this week, I still feel the Panthers are in the best position here. I think the Warriors aren't really a team that's going to disrupt too much. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind is it's easy enough saying, oh, the Panthers are a great defensive team. But another way that can also translate is into attack. Because if the Warriors are getting good field position and the Panthers are holding off the defense, that just means a turnover. Now, they could get repeat sets, and fair enough. Sean Johnson has a good enough kicking game to get repeat sets. And Tamare Martin, I think he's got a good enough kicking game as well to get repeat sets. But if the Panthers are slowing down the progress of the Warriors, especially in front of their own try line, and getting turnovers, the Panthers have an incredible ability to move the ball out, especially with the forwards and the backs they've got. They've got hard-working players. Liotta and Fisher-Harris through the middle are exceptionally hard-working forwards, but players such as Fanoa Blake can try and disrupt that and can try and, really hit them hard through the middle. Now, they will be missing Jerome Luai, so that I think it takes a little bit of sting out of their attack. Now, I like Jack Cogger. I think he's decent, but he's not Jerome Luai, which is okay, that's fine. But there are 4 key players for me on the Panthers that are best in off-the-cuff scenarios, which the Warriors might try to press onto the Panthers very quickly. We saw a game a few weeks ago. It was the Panthers versus the Seagulls, and I thought the Seagulls were very impressive in that game, and they certainly could have come away with the result. It was only a 12-point difference, but how that game was going, the Seagulls were really putting up a good fight. And the reason for that was Cherry Evans, over on the defensive right-hand side for the Seagulls, was putting pressure on Nathan Cleary on the left-hand side for the Panthers. So getting up as close as possible, putting as much pressure onto Nathan Cleary to disrupt him is the most important thing, and putting pressure on Jack Cogger, who has experience but is relatively inexperienced compared to Cleary and Jerome Luai and other players in the spine like Kenny and Edwards. So putting pressure on those guys as soon as possible is of vital importance. But the thing is, yes, they don't have Jerome Luai, but the other 3 players I think are underrated in their ability to create off the cuff. Because we look at the Panthers as like a team that plays off a certain system. They have individuals that can play however they need to in any given moment. Now, number 1 for me was Jerome Luai, but number 2 for me is probably Dylan Edwards. He can score from nothing. 3rd best for the Panthers is probably Nathan Cleary, and 4th best that people don't really... I mean, people talk about him in high regard, but not in the kind of way I mean, is Isaiah Yeo, because his ability to think clinically in quick moments is highly underrated. People don't talk about that enough. They just see, he's hardworking, makes good meters, he has a good pass here and there, and he can allow the ball to flow from left to right, right to left. Same with Patrick Carrigan, even more smoothly than Patrick Carrigan, I'd say. But his decision making is excellent and is almost another part of the spine. I don't think people normally consider the lock as part of the spine, but he acts as a very important player through the middle. So Nathan Cleary, Dylan Edwards, and Isaiah Yeo, will be hugely important in disrupting what the Warriors tried to do to disrupt the Panthers, if that makes sense. So they will try and get up on Nathan Cleary very quickly, but players like Isaiah Yeo will help to take some of that pressure away. So it's about putting pressure on him as well, slowing him down. And the Panthers actually lead the league in post-contact meters, I believe. So they need to make sure as soon as they make contact with a forward, they've got to come down. They've got to come down straight away. They cannot let them have easy meters through the middle. And players like Fanoa Blake have got to dominate through the middle. And players like Wade Egan can feed off the back of that and make good meters through the middle. So one key area I think the Warriors will look to exploit the most, because certainly they can use Charles Nickel-Klokstad around the back. If they find anyone that's kind of stepped out of line, Nickel-Klokstad can really break that line, find ways through. The kicking game from Sean Johnson is huge, but into the corners, I believe it's going to be Taruva on the left wing, and that'll be Watene-Zelezniak's side. He is a beast in the air. So we could be seeing a lot of kicks, especially short side. Like, the Warriors might want to spread the ball, but they might kick a lot of times short side, straight up into the air for Watene-Zelezniak to chase, to go one-on-one against Taruva, which is going to be really dangerous for him. Like, I like Taruva. He's a hard worker. He works hard to get up to the ball in the air, but against somebody with the leap and height of Watene-Zelezniak and his experience as well, I think Dallin's going to come off better in a lot of those scenarios. It doesn't always mean it's going to result in a try, because he could get tackled when he comes down, might not be able to offload the ball, but that is a key point that I think the Warriors will stress to focus on, especially. But I do think, again, a little bit like the Broncos and Storm, it's one is going to play mostly off a system and follow a typical path. The other needs to look to disrupt and find one-on-ones where they feel they have the best advantage. So, that being said, I'm going to take the Panthers to win 1-12 points. Next up, we have the Cronulla Sharks versus the Sydney Roosters. Starting with the Sharks, they finished their regular season in 6th place on the ladder. They've won 4 in their last 5 games, and their home record is 7 wins and 5 losses. They also won last time out against the Raiders. This week, they'll be hosting from the PointsBet Stadium in Sydney. Now, looking at the squad that they've initially announced so far for this week, in the backs, it includes Connor Tracy, Sione Katoa, Jesse Ramian, Siasifa Talakai, Ronaldo Mulatalo, Braden Trindle, and Nicholas Hines. In the forwards includes Toby Rudolph, Blake Brayley, Braden Hamlin-Uele, Britton Niokora, Wade Graham, and Cameron McInnes. And on the bench is Jack Williams, Royce Hunt, Thomas Hazelton, and Oregon Kaufusi. Looking at percentage stats for the Sharks, they have a 57% win rate, 75% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 87.2%. Moving on to the Roosters, they finished their regular season in 7th place on the ladder. They've won 5 in their last 5, and their away record is 5 wins and 7 losses. They also won last time out against the Rabbitohs. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far for this week, in the backs, it includes James Tedesco, Fetalega Pauga, Billy Smith, Joseph Manu, Joseph Suwali, Luke Keary, and Sam Walker. In the forwards is Fletcher Baker, Brandon Smith, Lindsay Collins, Sao Wong, Nat Butcher, and Victor Radley. I might have just messed up Wong's first name there, I do apologise. On the bench is Sandon Smith, Egan Butcher, Terrell May, and Angus Crichton. Looking at percentage stats for the Roosters, they have a 52% win rate, 74% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 87.3%. So, last week I mentioned that I didn't really trust the Sharks that much. I didn't trust the Raiders either, but I trusted the Sharks more to win that game, so that's why I backed them, and they won. The Roosters I mentioned a few weeks ago that I was starting to trust them. So are the Sharks trustworthy enough to compete against the Roosters? I feel that they've kind of earned it at this point. Now, at the start of the season, we were looking at the Roosters as a team that probably wasn't going to make the top 8, but early enough they turned things around. They had to change some things up. They had a couple of injuries to deal with. But they've really turned their season around and are firing on all cylinders. I think they're the only team in the top 8 with a 5-win streak, except for the Knights. I apologise. But the Roosters are a really trustworthy team now. I am slightly trusting the Sharks because they've won 4 in their last 5. But I still think, for me, there's an element of doubt over the Sharks, only because of, would dropping Matt Moylan be the right move? Clearly, you could say, well, obviously, yes, right now. They've been on incredible form since they dropped him. Clearly, it's the right move. That's completely fine. I don't recall seeing Braden Trindle in big games. I don't think I've ever seen him in a big game, and that might just be my lack of knowledge on the league. I don't recall seeing him in big games. There is also doubts that we talk about this, and this was a big conversation around State of Origin a few months back. Is Nicho Hynes a big game player? And that was one reason why a lot of people said he shouldn't be called up for New South Wales, is because they don't think he's a big game player. This is the biggest game of the season so far. So that's where my doubt comes in for the Sharks. I don't have an issue with Moylan being dropped because it clearly has worked. But the Roosters, even with all the chaos that's happened in their team, they've dealt with it well. And even with players kind of playing out position from time to time, they've dealt with it well. Sam Walker being back in is huge, and being back for a few weeks to really get used to the pace of the game again is big for them. Luke Keary, I trust implicitly to run the show however he feels fit. The key for the Roosters is having James Tedesco organising perfectly in defence and being as much of a threat through the middle in attack. He's going to be huge for them. Another key is actually a slightly strange way of looking at it, is a good thing for the Roosters is that Warrior-Hargreaves is not there. He is a penalty machine. I said this exact thing during the Rugby World Cup, the Rugby League World Cup last year for New Zealand. I can't remember which game it was. It might have been like the quarterfinals or semi-finals, but I think Warrior-Hargreaves was out or was unavailable for like the rest of the tournament, and I said that that is the best thing possible for New Zealand, because having him in that team, yes, you know, it's great. He can back you up in a fight. Brilliant. It runs hard. Okay, great. But if you have someone in there that's a liability every single week, a liability up to the point where it's not just giving away penalties or dropping the ball because he's hot-headed, it's punching somebody in the face and getting sent off and being a man down for 10 minutes. Well, if you punch someone in the face, it's going to be the rest of the game. But you know what I mean. He's likely to get sent off or even sin-binned. So missing Warrior-Hargreaves, I don't think is a big miss at all. It's actually a positive. So the Roosters can focus on just settling into the game. It's not going to be disruptive if Warrior-Hargreaves is there. It's just going to kill any kind of momentum that they've got, because I think he's going to cause problems. So it's just about the Roosters being as clean as possible, completing their sets, because their completion rate is not brilliant. 74, which I believe is kind of below average, but they need to make sure that they complete at a high level. But the Sharks, defensively, they can be strong, but they've been a little bit lackluster this season. In attack, they can be exceptionally talented, but at times they have struggled. But it's all about the kicking game from the Sharks. Early kicks, I feel we're going to get a lot of 40-20 attempts from Braden Trindle in particular. But my biggest doubt is Trindle in a big game scenario and Nico Hines. Has he really proven himself in big games? I don't think so. But I do trust Brandon Smith, Luke Keary, Sam Walker, James Tedesco to run the show. Experienced players, confident players. So I'm going to lean that way in favour of the Roosters. But I do think that with Pauga on the wing, he is going to be a key target and is going to get beaten a few times on the wing in aerial battles. So I think it's going to be a close one because they are quite evenly matched, but I do think the spine of the Roosters is strong enough, confident enough to overcome the Sharks. So I'm going to go with the Roosters to win, 1 to 12 points. Finally for this week, we have the Newcastle Knights versus the Canberra Raiders. Starting with the Knights, they finished their regular season in 5th place on the ladder. They've won 5 in the last 5, and their home record is 9 wins and 3 losses. They also won last time out against the Dragons. This week, they'll be hosting from the McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far for this week, in the backs, it includes Kalen Ponga, Dominic Young, Dane Gagai, Bradman Best, Greg Marju, Tyson Gamble, and Jackson Hastings. In the forwards is Jacob Saifiti, Phoenix Crosland, Leo Thompson, Tyson Frizzell, Lachlan Fitzgibbon, and Adam Elliott. And on the bench is Kurt Mann, Daniel Saifiti, Jack Hetherington, and Matt Croker. Looking at percentage stats for the Knights, they have a 57% win rate, 76% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 87.9%. Moving on to the Raiders, they finished their regular season in 8th place on the ladder. They've only won 2 in their last 5 games, and their away record is 6 wins and 6 losses. They also lost last time out against the Sharks. Looking at the squad that they've announced so far for this week, in the backs it includes Jordan Rapiner, James Schiller, Jack Whiten, Matthew Timoko, Nick Kotrich, Matt Frawley, and Jamal Fogarty. In the forwards is Atta Mariota, Zach Wolford, Joseph Tarpany, Hudson Young, Elliot Whitehead, and Hohepa Puru. And on the bench is Tom Starling, Emre Gula, Pasami Salo, and Trey Mooney. Looking at percentage stats for the Raiders, they have a 57% win rate, 76% completion rate, and a tackle efficiency of 87.6%. So, of the 4 games, this one appears to be the most obvious one for me. Like, maybe the next obvious one is the Panthers over the Warriors, but this one could not be more one-sided. You have a team that's won 5 in their last 5. I think they're on a 7-game win streak at this point, playing against the Raiders, who have only won 2 in their last 5. The Knights have won 9 games and lost 3 at home, and the Raiders are 50-50 when playing away. You look at the team that the Raiders have to put out, Jack Whiten's not even in the spine. You've got players like Papali'i isn't included, so he's a big miss. And then you essentially have the first team available, the whole first team available for the Knights on incredible form at home. I don't think too much needs to be said about this. I'm going to break down the game in some way, but for me, the game plan for the Raiders needs to be basically the same as what I said about Melbourne Storm needing to do on the Broncos and what the Warriors need to do on the Panthers. They need to disrupt. They need to cause as much chaos as possible. Push up early when the Knights are trying to spread the ball in, their own, in the Raiders 20. Kick on early tackles in the set. Turn Kalen Ponga around. Make him have to chase the ball constantly, time and time again. Wear him out. Do your absolute best to get repeat sets. I wouldn't even worry too much about genuine attacking kicks to the corners. You can do it from time to time. Greg Marju's probably the best side to go on because he has made mistakes. Dominic Young has made mistakes as well. But I've personally seen more from Greg Marju. I don't have the stats to back that up. But height-wise especially, Greg Marju's the better side to attack, in the air at least. Because if you're trying to play a ball, like pass a ball over the top, Dominic Young has a better chance of reaching it, given his height. And I think he's at least top 5 fastest in the NRL, so if he gets that ball, he's gone. No one's chasing him, simple as that. So the Raiders, they need to kick early when the ball's in their own half. Go for 40-20 attempts often. They need to dominate through the middle. They can do it. I don't think the Knights forward pack is particularly impressive. So the Raiders can certainly win the forward battle because they've got the players to do it. But in terms of the spine, the organisation could be a little bit off. So the Knights feel like they're in the best situation here. And I like the Knights not just because they can play in the system that they've got. I think they're a well-balanced team. But they can kind of play off the cuff. Tyson Gamble, I think, is a good decision maker. Jackson Hastings does kind of calm things down a little bit with his kicking game. But if you need anybody in the league, anyone that's top 5 at creating chances from nothing, you have Kalen Ponga right there. So as much as the Raiders can pressure the Knights when the Knights have the ball, if you just give them just enough time for Hastings to link up with Gamble, he's smart enough to make that split second decision, maybe even step past a man, find a gap. That ball finds its way into the hands of Kalen Ponga and there's just a little bit of space, he's going to get through. Because with his step and with his pace, no chance, you're not getting him. So if you're going to move up to disrupt, you have to be moving as a team, communicate and make sure you lock down Hastings and Gamble instantly. Because if that ball gets to Ponga and you've been trying to jam them and you leave all that space behind, that's a chip kick over the top. And Ponga's getting to it first. No question. So you have to be constantly communicating and you have to disrupt Gamble and Hastings. Now, I do like Jamal Fogarty. I think his kicking game is pretty good, but the main focus is getting repeat sets as much as possible. You need to wear down the Knights to the point where you're just relentless on their line time and time and time again and just barrel over. Because they can do it with the forwards they've got, they can do it. They can barrel over through the middle, get those easy extra 2-pointers. And then as long as they're still keeping the Knights knackered through the middle, they're going to have to start shifting out wide, using their wide players through the middle as well early in the tackle count, which is a typical thing anyway. But if their wide players are battered and bruised because they need to pick up the slacks when carrying the ball out in early tackles, they're not going to have that same energy, that same penetration, that same spark when the ball spreads out wide. They're going to be knackered, and that's going to give the Raiders more time to shift across and react to problems. So what the Raiders need to do is get repeat sets, as many repeat sets as possible, go for 40-20s, kick early in the count, try and kick in the in-goal area as much as possible, get Kalen Ponga moving from side to side over and over and over again. So that's the best bet for the Raiders. But if they let the Knights get in a rhythm, nah, it is not happening for the Raiders. I can't see it happening anyway, even with what I've just explained about what they should be doing. I don't think they're going to get the chance to do what they need to do to disrupt, because the Knights are just too good. Too confident, too good, simple as that. So I'm going to go with the Knights to win, 13+. So to recap my predictions for week 1 of finals, I'm going to take the Broncos to win 1 to 12 points, the Panthers to win 1 to 12 points, the Roosters to win 1 to 12 points, and the Knights to win 13+. In terms of winners' confidence, I'm at about 80%. Now the 2 games that are question marks for me, the biggest one there is the Roosters beating the Sharks. I certainly think that the Sharks can do it. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, but I just felt it was fair to lean towards the Roosters given the points that I raised. The other question mark for me, and it's not as much of a question mark, is probably Melbourne Storm being able to beat the Broncos. I think the Broncos are the best team in the league, but it's only because of the spine of Melbourne Storm. They are insanely good. That is the best spine in the NRL when Pappenhausen is included. So I'm not really including Nick Meaney in that, but when Pappenhausen is on, included with Munster, Hughes and Grant, they could cause some real issues for the Broncos. Knights, I'm very confident with, and the Panthers, I'm still very confident with, but I think the Warriors can still find ways to score and make it somewhat competitive. So 80% in terms of win confidence, and on the margin, I'm actually at about 90%. I'm very confident with these because the Broncos, Panthers and Roosters are close enough. Slight question mark over the Panthers and Warriors because the Panthers could run away with the game. I could see that happening still. But the Knights, I'm also very confident about winning 13+. Not that the Raiders can't do anything about it and can't challenge, but for me, the Knights are just leagues above. So that is my recap for week 1 of finals. So that is going to be it for this video. If you have any predictions for this week, let me know in the comments down below. Also, let me know how you got on last week. If there are any major updates in changes to the squad, I will leave it in the pinned comment down below where my recap for round 27 is as well. But thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.